I appreciate the time you take, not only today, but for all you do to help our community. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube of Provo City Council, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. Please be aware that microphones that pick up noise of paper and other rustling objects. Further, be aware that microphones can also pick up side conversations. Let's begin with the roll call. Cliff, we'll start with you.
Cliff Strachan, Gary McKinn,
Dave Sewell,
George Handley,
Jeff Ringer,
Gary Winterton,
David Harding, Scott Campbell,
Dave Connect,
Matthew Christensen.
Very good. Bill, would you start us with prayer?
Father in heaven, we're grateful for this opportunity we have to meet together with the City Council and Landmarks Commission. We're grateful for the degree of volunteerism we have in this city, for the efforts. We're willing to put forward for the betterment of the community. Father, thank you for this food that has been provided right now, bless you. In Jesus Christ, amen.
And first item is a review of the purposes and duties of the Landmarks Commission. And do we turn this over to the chair or to Gary or to Bill? Who should we turn this to do this discussion, start this discussion on?
I can do it if you'd like.
Please, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, the Landmarks Commission was established in the mid-1990s. And part of the reason for that was to remember and honor the history of Provo City, more particularly as it relates to specific architectural types or important historical landmarks or buildings, things like that. And so with landmarks, we have an ordinance, and the Landmarks Commission plays two major functions. One is to recommend to the municipal council different types of structures, primarily structures in the city that hold some sort of significant historical meaning through either their architecture or maybe people that have lived there, and recommend these to the council to be put on the landmarks registry so that these buildings and sites can be protected. And also recommending historic districts, areas of the city, not necessarily an individual building, but maybe a group of buildings. So we have a historic district in the downtown area, and there's also a federal district over in the Joaquin neighborhood that's recognized. Then as people come in and they're doing development activity, sometimes that involves in one way or another one of these historic structures or something in a historic district. And so the Landmarks Commission also has an administrative role in approving those applications that will impact those structures in some sense. So they make recommendations for the types of structures to be put on the landmarks registry, also the ordinances that surround the landmarks, and it's Title 16. I'm going off memory here, Title 16. And then administrative approvals. And with that, those are the two main ordinance functions. Then to support that, the Landmarks Commission has been heavily involved every year with the Freedom Festival and the historic walking tour in Provo, celebrating and remembering and honoring these structures, and also in the development of a historic preservation. Well, I can't even remember what do we officially call the app? Josh?
Provo Historic Tours.
Provo Historic Tours app.
Slides on that.
Yeah, and so that's one of the main those two things have been most recently some of the main activities they've been involved in. And I think we'll get into both those here in a minute and other things that they've been involved with. But that's generally the purpose and the brief history of the Landmarks Commission and their charge.
Very good, thank you. The next item is a discussion on the Landmarks Commission initiatives and some of those things that you were mentioning. So who will, Scott, are you the chair of this meeting here?
I am the chair, yes. So we can, and I'm not sure that we, okay, I'll actually ask Justin to put this
Thank you. So Gary reviewed this, kind of the history of the commission, membership and code. The code gives us 11 things that we're supposed to do, and they all kind of have an action word in them, and those are at the beginning of Title 16, and those are the things we try to adhere to as we work on our different initiatives. Like Gary said, we identify through surveys and inventory, we designate sites by putting them on the register, and then we protect them by administratively reviewing certificates for appropriateness and land use applications that relates to sites. Lately, what we've been doing, again, we've been reviewing applications, developing the Walking Tour app. We've been presenting preservation awards with our historic home tour, and then working on some enhanced or new outreach and social media efforts, as well as working on a number of CLG Grants Projects. And I'll talk a little bit later about what that means. What is CLG? CLG means Certified Local Government. So in 2017, we processed 2 landmark nominations, which is a 200% increase over the previous decade, essentially. And then we processed 2 certificates of appropriateness, one for the second Alma Van Wagenen House at 400 East Center, and another for this commercial space at about 270 West Center. The one on the left is pretty much complete, and the one on the right is yet to begin construction. With our historic home tours, we do 2 nights each year of 4 to 6 homes, and then on Friday night we have a reception where we have a speaker talk about some topic germane to preservation in Provo. Last year we had a great presentation about Salt Lake architects and their designs in Provo and the work that they did and how that related to architectural advancements in history throughout the country. This coming year, or this summer, we're actually excited to host our first tour in the Dixon neighborhood in June. And the first time we forayed into that neighborhood, and we're excited to dig into some of the very early pioneer history, and then a swath of homes representing periods all the way up into the post-World War I era in Dixon. Our historic tours app, we have 20 sites in downtown Provo. Many of you have seen this a number of years ago when we initially started development. It has a GPS-based tour guidance and has audio narration for every site. And one of our favorite things is it has re-photography of each site. So we found a historic picture of each of these 20 sites, and then we took a new modern picture with the exact same placement and dimensions. Some of them are fun to look at, some of them are sad, like the old fire station where we're basically just taking pictures of a piece of grass between the county complex. But it's been enjoyable. We've had 2,626 downloads. We seem to pick up in downloads when New Skin hosts an out-of-town group. A while ago, we had a couple hundred downloads that were all located from China. The device IDs were from China. So we correlated that with a large number of Chinese New Skin affiliates that were in town. So we also this last year received an award from the Utah chapter of the American Planning Association for the app, an achievement award in their information technology section. We wanted to show you, just those of you who haven't seen, some of the examples of the re-photography we did that we think is really the highlight of the app. That was a historic image of the temple, and then we did 2 pictures of fire and post-fire. And then one of my favorites. Oh yeah. So we've done those images for all 20 of the sites in the store. And that's both available for both Android and iOS in the App Store and on Google Play. So social media has been a big push for us this last year. We started with the real vital direction of Marion Wardle, one of our landmark commission members who just left on an ecclesiastical assignment. A initiative called This is Provo, Then and Now. It's produced 17 videos with cooperation of Channel 17, along with blog posts. The videos are presented on Facebook, as well as a link to the blog located at This is Provo. And we've had over 40,000 views on those 17 videos. They're trafficking as well as any of the productions that Channel 17 has done. And to give you a taste of what we've been doing with that, we have one of our most popular videos, which is a video reviewing the history of the Alexander House, south of the temple, and unfortunately featuring a short primer on landmarks for me. So.
So how does a property become a landmark? Well, in Provo City, you have to meet 3 criteria to become a Provo City historic landmark. First, the building has to be at least 50 years old. Second, it has to maintain its historic integrity, which means it kind of has to look like it did originally, or a quick shorthand would be, would the original owner recognize the building if they walk by today? Third, it has to have historic significance, which means it has to be important as an example of architecture or design, or related to people or events that have historic significance on a local, state, and national level. If those criteria are met, then an application is filled out and research is done on the property, and that application research goes to the Landmarks Commission, which reviews it and a public meeting, and then the Landmarks Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, makes the final decision. If the City Council says yes, then the property is entered in the Provo Landmarks Register and becomes a Provo Historic Landmark.
Hi, I'm Karen, and I'm representing the Landmark Commission. And today we're at the historical William D. Alexander House on 91 West, 200 South, which was built in 1891 and is listed on the National Register of Historical Places. This beautiful home is the only known example of stick-style domestic architecture in Utah. I hope you can take a look at the outside architecture of this building, because there are wood pieces that are horizontal, diagonal, and any which way you want, but it's all for show. None of it is structurally sound, it is just for decor. This beautiful building is now the home of Encircle, the LGBTQ Family and Youth Resource Center. This offers a place of safety, sanctuary, and resources for those who need it in Utah Valley. Please drive by, take a look at this beautiful building, and know that it is one of the most gorgeous buildings that has been restored and has been put to good use even today.
My name is Max Eddington, and I'm the Program Director at Encircle, LGBTQ Family and Youth Resource Center. So we provide services for LGBTQ youth, young adults, and their families. We have support groups, and we have therapy, free and reduced price therapy. We have activities where people can come kind of bond together. It's just a safe space for LGBTQ people in Utah County to come spend time with their friends. Being able to do this job in a historic house is amazing, especially because we kind of feel like this house is a metaphor for the people we serve. We've done a lot of renovation to the house, and it looks clean and crisp and beautiful, but also we've left all of the original woodwork, the original stained glass. And a lot of the people that we serve have kind of difficult lives or difficult backgrounds. And being in a house that is old and has scars in it, I think is meaningful for the people.
So that video garnered about 4,000 views, which is about at the top of the videos that we've produced. We're just about ready to launch a, you may call it a second season or a new round of these videos coming next month, starting with the gallery in the former William D. Roberts' house. Apparently, William and Dee were popular back in the day. So William D. Roberts' house, the namesake of the Roberts Hotel on 500 West and 200 North. It's an art gallery, and that'll be the property we start with, as well as a couple other exciting videos we have in store.
Can I ask you a question about that house? Particularly, is it a, who financed the renovations of those? Do you know?
So, benefactor from Park City, Holly Alden, is the wife of the founder of Skull Candy that produces headphones and audio equipment. She purchased the home and uses it in a circle, and then they accomplish the work by both volunteer labor, a lot of the grunt work, removal, finishes, wallpaper removal, those kind of things were done by volunteers. And then they had private donations and benefactors, as well as concessions and donations from contractors and suppliers as well.
And to me, that as I understand that is one of the biggest challenges that we face in these type of communities is you need to have a benefactor. You need to have someone that is willing to step up and say, you know what, community is important to me, or something that they have a belief in, because I'm guessing, you know, I rent offices and have old is hard to keep up. It's a challenge, and I get that. And for somebody to be able to step up and do that, I'll bet, I don't know what this circle would pay in rent, but it would be hard unless you did have somebody like a benefactor that would be willing to step in and say, you know what, I'm willing to do this. Is this what you're finding with landmark buildings? It's somebody somewhere somehow needs to step up and say, we need to preserve these things, or are we able to do things as a city? That's one of the questions that I've got. That's in this commission.
I think there's some instances where it's hard for the city and for to work together with the owners of the building. We have a great example on Center Street though, but people who they loved the historic building and they had the money and it was important to them and they wanted to do it.
And it was their own building.
Yeah, it's a residence. So.
But then,
One that we just approved. Josh had the image of the minutes.
right, Scott actually works in Provo Town Square. Has his business there. The group of buildings located at Center Street and University on the northwest corner. And that whole complex of buildings was actually purchased and renovated in the early 80s through private investors doing a market rate project, as well as the Night Block and the Gate Snow building across the street.
And they're doing it market rate.
Yeah, it's a market rate project. There's a lot of incentives available for those types of projects, and there's other things that, based on your instruction for our last meeting, we're coming back with you later in this discussion to talk about that specifically.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead.
No, thank you.
We're in a historic home. We have one, and we're looking for a benefactor. So yes, it's really great if we could find it.
It's a challenge.
As part of our reception, and I mentioned earlier that we do with the home tours, we present preservation awards. There was a lull in being organized with this last year. We got everything together and presented some awards. We have 3 categories of awards. One that we had the inaugural presentation last year, the Stephen Hales Award, and we presented that to Stephen's wife, Callie Hales. We also have a preservation award, which recognizes rehabilitation, adaptive reuse, and preservation of buildings. And Habitat for Humanity, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Encircle received that award last year. We also have an award for stewardship, which would essentially be the maintenance and preservation of a building over an extended period of time. And we anticipate to present that award to actually a public entity this year.
Can I break in here and say about the Callie Hales home that I think I should mention that a great deal of free work as a labor of love was given by Dave Connect. And
NeighborWorks.
And NeighborWorks and Sherry Spencer and Kim Santiago. Just out of love for the Hales family.
CLG Grant Projects. So the acronym stands for Certified Local Government, which is a federally established program under the National Historic Preservation Act, whereby federal funds are channeled through state offices of historic preservation to local communities. To be a certified local government, you have to have a landmarks ordinance and some type of body. So we have Title 16, which is our landmarks ordinance, and we have our landmarks commission. So Provo is a certified local government, and we've received 3 grant periods, funds from the state of Utah to conduct preservation activities. First was the historic walking tour. We paid $2,000 to a UVU class that collaborated with us in developing the initial beta version of the app. On the $2,000 grant with a $1,000 grant with $1,000 from the city. Our last project, which was we're really excited about, it was the update to the East Central Historic District, which is basically the main core areas of the Joaquin and Mazer neighborhood. What this did is it updated the district to homes that are now 50 years old or approaching 50 years old. The original survey was done about 20 years ago. So a large number of both residential and commercial buildings are now eligible to be listed and eligible for all the financial programs and incentives that come along with that. We actually paid $8,000 for that survey, which went on to every property within that area, but we didn't pay any money out of the city's pocket because we used a $4,000 grant from UDOT, which was given to us as money to compensate for the damage that was done to eligible structures in the 300 South project. And so by tearing down the old Sinclair gas station and tearing the front off of the amenity inn, we got $4,000. So it was one of those where the losses weren't too painful and the gains were $4,000. So we're able to match that state money with state money, and we felt good about that. This year, we're embarking on a study of Dixon Junior High, of its condition, of its feasibility for reuse, and programs for that, and potential concept designs. We received a $10,000, or receiving a $10,000 grant from the state, and Provo City School District has committed to matching that grant with $10,000 out of their funds. So over the past 4 or 5 years, we've been able to do $30,000 worth of preservation activities with $1,000 from the city. So what do we want to do? Surveys and incentives. Title 16, the landmarks title, says that we should survey the city and update that every 10 years. We're kind of behind. We were 10 years behind on the East Central District, and that is the only district outside of downtown that is a National Historic District that has houses in it. We've surveyed the rest of the pioneer neighborhoods, but those surveys haven't been updated since the 90s. So we'd like to update those surveys to, one, understand where we are today as far as those resources, and bring newly eligible resources into the fold. We'd also like to look at newly eligible areas such as the tree streets, the university or gardens to the south, areas that in the initial survey weren't eligible or weren't 50 years old and now are. And a lot of those areas have a number of significant resources and provide good context as whole areas for those development patterns from those areas. So the benefits for getting that done is financial programs for property owners. They can apply for 20% tax credits for projects, both from the federal and state government, depending on the ownership structure. And it helps us identify and recognize and protect those resources. It also provides a big boost in neighborhood identity that we experience in the pioneer neighborhoods, and we'd like to be able to extend that.
So those credits are eligible for improvements to the property.
Correct. So if you have an income producing property, you can apply for and receive a 20% credit against your approved project expenses from against your federal income tax liability. If you have a residential or occupied structure, you can apply for a 20% credit, 20% of your eligible expenses as a credit towards your state income tax liability. And that can either be amortized over a period of time, or it can be syndicated to, in larger commercial projects, can be syndicated to tax credit investors to provide you cash up front at a certain discount rate. The last time we met with you, you asked us to come back and provide our ideas and thoughts as to what types of incentives could both encourage and provide new registrants or new nominations to the landmarks register, and ways to incent people to maintain, renovate, and preserve their historic homes. We went through a list of everything we do and things that we'd like to do or propose could be helpful. The first category is staff assistance, which are basically things that we do right now. We provide assistance with design advice, researching the history of their home, and help people apply for grants and tax credits. Things that we'd like to look at or in some degrees have, are exemptions or variances from building code and zoning standards. And these are things that we found are pretty common practice in the Intermountain region for other cities of our size. The first is building code consideration, and that's essentially something we do already, but could use being further codified. There is existing building code, the EV code that permits looking at a historic building differently than we would new construction. We already provide additional uses for historic properties in certain residential zones. We have an applicant coming in right now with an ordinance amendment to extend those from just the RC zone to some of the R1 zones. Also, some of the others are special consideration for variances dealing with setbacks due to the often non-compliant nature of historic properties and homes. And the last one, the use of existing accessory buildings as accessory dwellings. A lot of these historic homes have stables or carriage houses that are larger than are needed for a garage or have second stories. And we've had a couple different property owners come in and ask about the feasibility of converting an upper story of a carriage house into an accessory dwelling unit. We currently don't permit accessory apartments outside of the main structure. So that's something, another consideration we've listed. The grant eligibility are things that are already in place.
Josh, quick question.
I'm sorry.
Would that be only for historically recognized properties, or would we consider, or would the suggestion be using the accessory buildings as accessory dwellings more broadly?
So this recommendation from the Landmark Commission would be to use that opportunity as an incentive to register the property.
For existing.
For pre-existing accessory. Okay. We'd like to ramp back up our recognition. We have bronze plaques whose provenance are completely unknown to me or anyone else in the office, but I'm still trying. There's only a limited number of foundries around, so I'm still trying to figure out who made those and make more of them. We've also last year made a new run of our historic walking tour booklet, and that needs some additional updates to include new listings. These last two bullet items are things that we think could be impactful and are really in the realm of what the city council can do. We took a look at all of the currently listed landmark structures. That means all the structures that are in a district, in a local district, or individually nominated. The total current taxable value of that is $11,379,000 and change. The total current tax proceeds to the city from that at our current levy rate is $25,478. If that shows us for a relatively modest amount of money compared to the overall budget, but I'm sure you get that from everybody who wants money, right? So a relatively modest amount. We could provide incentives based on property tax abatement to owners. That could be a blanket across the board abatement just for having a registered property. It can be tied to a program of maintenance and preservation. It can be tied to specific projects. If you spend money doing a project in your home, it can be a credit like the state and federal credits, or a number of different ways. But we felt that city's tax levy is one of those areas that we would recommend taking a look at as an area that you have purview over that could be used to incent additional preservation. Mr. Connect?
So you would do it as an incentive where they would get a tax break?
It could be structured a number of ways. Some cities do it just a straight across abatement. If your home is listed on the local landmarks register, they either completely, you don't pay your local levy and property tax, or it's capped at a certain rate to counter the property increase and sometimes gentrification in some neighborhoods where listings increase and desirability increases, that prevents some existing owners from remaining in houses based on their tax liability. We won't have that problem as much here with our really modest property tax rates. Or, like you said, it could be tied to as an incentive for doing work or maintaining a schedule of maintenance, or it could be tied to specific expenditures on renovation projects.
So in your example, if we exempted those properties, we would be giving up roughly $25,000.
Correct. If you just wiped it off 100%, you'd be 25,000.
That's just our portion of the property.
Correct. That's just the city levy.
Right.
Not the library, not the county.
Right. And have you thought of maybe doing it the other way, where you do collect it and the city then has this pot of money that they can grant back to people to do projects on these properties?
That's absolutely just taking that money from the general fund and creating a grant program is another way that we can incent as well. Absolutely.
Question on that 11,300,000. Is that only residences?
That's only residential properties. That's not. Yeah, because if we included the downtown district, you'd throw new skin in there. You'd end up with 90 million or something. But,
So our taxable rate is the 60% of the 11 million.
no, it's 60% of the assessed value times our levy.
Okay.
And the last one would be to provide building permit fee waivers on projects. Right now, if you come in with a $10,000 valuation on a project, say Matt wants to make his basement habitable for people over 5'6". You come in and apply for a building permit, and we could have the option of waiving that building permit fee. And on $10,000 permit, it's essentially $300. So those are a wide range of incentive options or programs that could be developed to provide both recognition and financial incentives to property owners, both to list their properties and then maintain and preserve their historic properties.
I can tell you that this is a real thing. There was a family in our neighborhood who considered very strongly moving their house to the historic register, but they kind of got cold feet because they said it'll just tie our hands and it doesn't give us anything. And so they didn't see, didn't seem like a good trade to them. So, but if they had some kind of an incentive, I think they might rethink that. And we would love to have, because I'm in the southeast area of town, we don't have many historic structures. So
one other thing that we didn't list because it's been hard to quantify it, but that we thought about a lot is essentially a pass of all passes, to steal the Seven Peaks phrase, for landmark owners and residential properties. for Provo City, rec center, golf, peaks, some tickets to the Covey Center, some package of city amenities that could be provided as an incentive. We just had a hard time quantifying the financial impact of that.
An aspect of that is this pamphlet that we've been developing to give to people that would be interested in possibly preserving their home as an historic site. And we have not been able to include some of these, of course, as yet, but that is part of that idea of publicity for the program.
Question. So what are other communities that have vibrant programs of this type? How do they get creative in finding and incentivizing money and investment?
There's a broad spectrum. Scott has a list from Boulder. I think he'll share some of those with you. One of my favorites in Utah is the program that Ogden City has that I think they fund both through some redevelopment affordable housing funds coming out of project area expenditures and also some CDBG funds. They provide an incentive in their downtown neighborhoods, like in the Eccles Historic District, for owner occupants to buy existing homes that have been converted to multifamily residences, and they give a certain, like a $15,000, somewhere around $15,000 per unit grant to those buyers to reconvert that home into a single-family residence. So you buy an old mansion that's been chopped up into 4 apartments, you could end up with $60,000 to help facilitate that reconversion. That's one local incentive that's very interesting.
Which would impact several homes just here in Joaquin neighborhood.
Yeah, Boulder's got a great program, Boulder, Colorado, including the waive sales tax if 30% on construction materials, if 30% of the materials are for the exterior of a building on a project. In addition to the federal and state income tax reductions. They also have extensive resources on their city's website for people who are considering. Sometimes it's hard to know where do you start with getting a contractor who's capable or has the knowledge and expertise to help you and give you a reason. We've found, at least in my neighborhood, in the Joaquin neighborhood, I found a lot of people get a bid that's either really high because they don't actually want to do it because they don't want to be responsible for the historic property, or they just don't know what they're doing. They get into it and they've done something wrong. So being able to have resources for the homeowners or the building owners. And I think also, like, it's easy the costs are definitely more quantifiable than the benefits for this. And it's having a business in Provo Town Square and being there, I have a pretty good pulse on tourism and people that are in town staying at the Marriott, they're in town for weddings at the Temple, they're in town for New Skin conventions or at the convention center. And daily there are comments of people who love their morning run through down Center Street to the hospital or through the neighborhoods. And we live in a historic home. There's people constantly stopping and taking pictures. Something unique that really does make a more meaningful experience here in Provo. I think especially with all the development, which is great, that's happening, to have some of those anchors to our culture and the history here is makes it a more meaningful trip. Either people that are moving here, which have new permanent residents, or just people that are passing through. So.
I'm curious, what were the disincentives that your friends were talking about? Why did they feel their hands were tied?
They felt like they wouldn't be able to make any changes to their home if they wanted to.
Is that a misnomer?
Very much.
I think, I think there's not a complete understanding, but I think they felt like they would have to jump through a bunch of hoops and then all they would get is a plaque on the house, but then their hands might be tied. One of them said to me, our hands would be tied.
And that's what I hear often. And why is that? Why do I hear that if it's not the truth?
Part of it's education.
Can I ask, what is the truth? I'd like to be educated, because my thoughts were, if you get this designation, we're now protecting historic structures. That protection means that if they want to build a wing on it or another story on it or change the appearance, they would not be able to, their hands would be tied, at least in those aspects.
To some degree, they would be. Josh can tell you.
Well,
more.
Scott's house is a great example. Tell me about your house.
So our house built originally in 1898, it was finished. Brick home. 20 years later, they built a brick extension on the back. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, the previous owners, they added a large master bedroom on the back of the house, the upstairs. Different materials, different construction, everything. But because it was on the back of the structure, and it, well, Josh probably remembers the process, but it looks the same from the front. You drive by the house, it's recognizable as it's, maintained its historic significance. Yet they were able to expand at probably 10-15% square footage, house on that project. Our neighbors have done similar projects, adding a whole second, first floor on the back, but maintaining the original structure. Another element of kind of considering to approve these changes is whether something like that is reversible, mostly reversible to, if somebody wanted to return the structure to its original shape and size, if that could be done.
There is flexibility for people to do what they would like, but much more restriction than a home that's not on it. I mean, that is just a reality.
It is.
And
Designed to protect and preserve.
yeah, the design and protect and preserve the historicity of the structure and the integrity of it. And so there are limitations that somebody who, just in a Rambler built in 1985 wants to do something to their home. They have much more flexibility and less governmental hoops to go through. They don't need a certificate of appropriateness to be able to do it.
Can I ask a slightly different question? I love preserving these old buildings, and what Scott said rings absolutely true to me. I think it's more difficult to quantify those benefits, but those benefits are really, really important, I think, to the identity of Provo. So I'm fully supportive. The question I have is actually somewhat different, though, and it has to do with, and I'm not quite sure if the Landmarks Commission is even the right entity, but I'm interested in commemorating a little more visibly the Native American history of the Valley and some of the sites associated with that history. We have a Provo Indian War Memorial, but we don't really have anything acknowledging the Native American experience. We've got the Fort Utah Memorial, which is, last I was there, which is a number of years ago, it's pretty neglected. It's in the middle of nowhere, and there's graffiti on it and so on. And I just wonder about sort of the deeper history of the city in terms of what options are available to us to be able to mark history, even if there's not. I mean, does it have to be an archaeological site, or is there leeway in the Landmarks Commission to be able to acknowledge and celebrate historical events with a little more visibility, so that there's a deeper sense of history in the community?
Yeah, we would like to and really have the mandate, as we talked about on that early slide, where it says, we're to educate about the history and make it more visible. There's a lot of opportunities to, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't delve into any of those areas of interpreting and making more visible any aspect of our history. It doesn't have to be a site. It could be a thematic resource related to a number of sites. It doesn't have to be a structure at a site. it could be an event that occurred somewhere, anywhere from location of battles or like the fort, or all the way up to industrial and things that more are related to specific sites like the Provo woolen mills. If you don't go look at history book, you have no idea that the largest fabric and woolen mill in the West was 2 blocks away over here. Or that there's a mill race that ran it that's running under the street. It's just not visible at all. So from the early history of native settlement all the way up to our early industrial history is a very fertile field for programs.
Do you have connection to local historians to be able to guide that process a little bit so that we're made aware of? I mean, I'm thinking everything from like the restoration of the Provo Delta down by the lake. There might be, I don't know the exact location of some of the archaeological findings they've had on the shore of Utah Lake. I know there was one that was 5,000 years old. And it might be outside of the city boundaries. I don't remember, but if we're gonna have say walkways in that area for people to enjoy the outdoors, but it would be nice to also educate a little bit about the Native American history there. Anyway, I'm just wondering if we lack or need somebody who can sort of provide, so it doesn't just happen by happenstance. Because if it happens by happenstance, it also gets erased by happenstance, right? You have a project come in, somebody builds a new building in a location, and we don't even know that it was right at the place of something pretty important.
I think what we suffer from in Provo is that, in one sense, Landmarks Commission is trying to fill that vacuum of history and providing access and education about history. But we don't actually have in Provo a historical society, which is kind of unusual for a town of this size. Really, Springville has a very active organization. And I think that's a difficulty. You can only do so much. And I wish that we could find a way of getting some of the historians from UVU, BYU, and others to put something together like that might help work hand in hand with landmarks on some of these that are probably would be difficult for us, I think, to get our arms around.
How do we get them all? I'll brainstorm later, but I'd love to see a historical society.
We're lucky that we have under a good base of history, writing, and documentation. Under Mayor Billings, a local historian was commissioned to write a series of books on the early history of the city.
Robert Carter.
Yeah, Robert Carter. And so we have good research and documentation of that early decade. But a lot of the intervening time, we have historic resources document, from different periods documenting the history. And we also have, a lot of resources with the Office of Public Archaeology at BYU and the Museum of Biblical Cultures that has collaborated on the excavation documentation of the Hinckley Mounds, the Provo Meeting House on the temple site. And there's a lot more that could be done in that arena. I think we lack a little bit of the institutional capacity to wrangle all of that. Gary keeps assigning me planning tasks. Come into my computer on this new computer system. A lot of cities of our size have a position in kind of the realm of a cultural resources manager that deals with cultural programs, history, those type of things. And is able to work on that all the way down to providing, developing that type of information for local schools, and really collaborating also with that nonprofit side and that historical society realm to do a lot of work in that area. But the Parks Department has actually been, it's something I'm trying to get more, figuring out how they're doing it. They've been putting up historical plaques in different projects, but sometimes they end up in weird places. Like there's one up in Rock Canyon Park that talks about Provo's first telegram line. That line terminated at Brigham Young's house south of the temple in downtown Provo. So I don't know why there's a plaque in Rock Canyon Park talking about the telegram line that wasn't anywhere near.
Wow, that's a good site for Mormon Indian history.
Right. So I think there's our efforts and also the newly reinvigorated Utah County Landmark Commission that if we had a little more capacity could be coordinated to get us more benefit.
What do you mean capacity? What does that mean?
Staff time.
Staff time. So
He's talking about those assignments I give him. This is his way of renegotiating.
Job description.
Unfortunately, Gary can't give me more time.
So I got a question. Videos are a good way to help educate people. It's sometimes difficult to go into just a dry document and say, oh, these are the do's and don'ts of owning a property. But if you do a video and you say, well, we're going to show a restoration of a home. I don't know if we had anything that was documented on the Michael Taylor property or any of the ones that have been done, but it'd be nice to kind of do almost like a this old house and show what it takes, which if you are buying one, what are you getting yourself into? What are the things that you should do and things that you shouldn't do, either to save money or to stay out of, not destroy the historic aspects of the home or property. And then in there, you could hopefully, if we get a better package of incentives, you can say, well, okay, so there are restrictions, but there are these great incentives.
One of the issues, and Josh has done an excellent job, I think, in this presentation of bringing things up, not just with historic landmarks and things that we're trying to do. As you can see, Josh and the Landmarks Commission have done an excellent job of trying to leverage the resources that we have to maximize our educational efforts. The app, that literally was done with staff time and a couple of $1,000s with the UVU group. And there are some things and ideas I know that the Landmarks Commission has to do more. There's more just history and education, some of the things that have been talked about here, some of the ideas that have come up. But we're kind of hitting a point from my perspective as the director of a department of it's going to cost money. To do a brass plaque is probably going to be more expensive than the average person thinks a brass plaque would be. And just those types of things, going to parks and I would love around town to not only have a historic, tour app that we have, but a historic sites app, and to do the same thing. But that's going to take money and resources and going in. And so I really do congratulate the Landmarks Commission and Josh. They've done an excellent job on very, very thin margins, maximizing what they've been able to do and accomplish. And that's one of the difficult realities of this. I've yet to walk into a room and say, have 100 people and say, who wants to support history and remember and would love to do these things? And everybody raises their hand. But there's a cost to it. And it's a thing that I would encourage the council not to forget about, and I think the Landmarks Commission would echo this, the quality of life that people feel in the community when they feel that connection with their history and their roots. And while yet we're moving forward in all of the great innovative things that are happening today, it just enhances the way people feel about their community and how they work in that. So it's not an insignificant issue.
Look through the slide really fast, but beginning kind of what your purposes are. At first, from reading the documents in our packet before, it really focused on the designation and those administrative decisions and things like that. But what we focused a lot on is that fostering community identity, educating citizens about Provo's history, I got, also just kind of encouraging appreciation for our past, educating and encouraging appreciation. And I appreciate that. I think that's important. Much of what you do is preserving so we can learn from the past and allow that to really help us make decisions for the future. And we talked about structures have to be 50 years old or older, and how you update a survey after 20 years. There's a lot of stuff that comes online. Looking back at 20 years, but I'm also wondering what we do as a community broadly, and maybe even as a city now. Are we doing things that in 50 years will be worth recognizing, worth preserving in 50 years? We're at a city center building here right now that it's kind of coming to the end of its useful life, and there's really not much serious discussion about preserving it. And perhaps that's in part because maybe it wasn't built in a way that would make it worth preserving. And so I appreciate your efforts on that, and I do think that that's an important part of our history, part of our heritage, part of our culture. And I hope that we're making decisions now not just to preserve what we had in the past, but also doing things that are worth preserving in the future.
Some architecture is worth forgetting.
Some ideas are bad.
Absolutely.
Hey, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here. Is there any other things that we can do as a council? Appreciate this information. What else? Anything?
With the incentives, with the things that we've proposed, I guess, what would be our next step?
I think, Gary, is there something that we can get from you to go from there to bring these to the council and have further discussion on those incentives?
Well, we could refine the incentive concepts that are there and bring back some things at a future council work session. There are also, I think one thing that might help the Landmarks Commission is and there's probably already an existing council committee, subcommittee or something that in which these types of issues may fall. And if there is, we could work with that subcommittee to refine them before we came back to a work session. I honestly hate to get too far down and spend too much time working on a proposal that we do it in a vacuum and then we come in and bring it to the council and it's just not very workable and there's just not a lot of support for it.
I'm wondering, as far as a committee, I only thought would be somebody with the library, but because there's a different animal over there though. I don't know what kind of committee we've got with following this landmarks right now. Claire, can you think of anything that would actually be a good marriage?
Put it anywhere as long as you had a group of individuals that want to work on some ideas with it.
Well, that may be the thing. Have you worked with BYU on some of their historical issues? I think of what George is talking about. I can't imagine that somebody at BYU is not going to be interested in. Has any contacts been made up there with some of these buildings?
I think we agree so.
With their buildings?
With their buildings, with the history of Provo even. I think where BYU started at our library here, and where it went to, and how it's evolved, there's got to be somebody that would be interested in some historical issues around Provo City. I was in Seattle last year, and I paid $30 to take their underground tour. And that was fascinating to me, to experience that. One of the fascinating things is they sure had a heck of an entertainer that was giving the tour. But I think there's some things that we can do with some of those things. I don't know if BYU is that an option that you know of anything that they have up there?
There's definitely people to collaborate with.
Definitely some historians, librarians.
Of the library, I mean, in the special collections, there's a wealth of material. They have a lot of the original photos.
there are a lot of people that in the community that we could collaborate with. And in my mind, that's not so much the issue, but as if we collaborated with BYU and wanted to go and move forward on something, say, just historical sites and working on locations in the community where important things happen, not dealing with the architecture and that stuff, which I think certainly falls under the purview of the Landmarks Commission here. Then the natural question would be, okay, so what do we do with that once we identify them? And that's where my concern begins, because anything that we're going to do, as you can see, Josh has been able to leverage $30,000 worth of effort in the city
By squeezing $1,000.
by squeezing $1,000 of cash and community development staff time into something. And now if we start going to parks and putting up plaques or doing things, there's an actual cost to my department and how we do that. And, you know, and then do we coordinate with because I know the Parks Department's trying to do some things. I know Gene over at the library is doing some things, and you know, so.
Would it be a good idea though to just start with, and maybe these are, I mean, obviously anytime you're going to have a suggestion that's going to cost money, then we really have to roll up our sleeves and make a decision about that. But it just seems to me that if there's, I don't know if the city creates a historical society or you have a subcommittee of the Landmarks Committee that's basically entirely made up of historians, and you have someone who does early Native American history, early Mormon pioneer history, maybe natural history. You bring them all together and they are just sort of consultants, and they're kind of helping to identify areas in the city that and issues that maybe need some sort of commemoration. And then we sort of figure out, well, how are we going to do this? And maybe some of it's just a one-off event that we do, or maybe it's a plaque, maybe it's built into something Parks and Rec is doing. But it seems like if there's not a guiding force there of some people who really know the history well, like I say, we're just sort of, what we're doing is just preserving whatever somebody out of the goodness of their heart and wisdom decides needs to be preserved, but we don't necessarily have any comprehensive plan to protect and preserve things.
And that's true. And the collaboration, frankly, is the easy part. Working with people, identifying people at BYU, they'd love to do that. UVU, they'd love to come in and because they love history and do those things. It's then taking it to the next step. But even that collaboration is going to require a lot of time and effort. And so that's why I'm talking about, as we're doing and going along with that, we can't come, you know, every month and have a meeting like this with the whole municipal council. But if there's a subcommittee of the council that we can work with, because I'm always a little, you know, if I went back, Josh would come into my office and say, what a great meeting. This is what I want to do. And we could go and do that, but there's a real cost to doing that, and effort and focus in what we're doing. And for me, I know, you know, I'm not looking for an answer. Yes, do here. We'll fund, you know, $30,000 in this budget cycle to be able to bring to fruition these things. But at the same time, I don't know how much time and effort I want to invest in it, and ask Landmarks and other people if we're really not going to do more than get together and talk and have a couple of lunches at the community development conference room. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, what are we actually going to do next? That's what I'm wondering. Yeah. What's next?
I think we need to have that discussion, and I think we're a few minutes over from our time, though. Gary, Josh, we need some counsel, I think, directions to go, and we as a council need to talk about what direction we want to go. Is also, I'd like some recommendations from Landmarks and from Josh. We've got these things, and I think those that's a good start. I think we need a few more.
At our next Landmarks Commission meeting, how about if we talk about that, Scott?
Thank you for coming. We appreciate all your time and all you do for our town. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Council or, sorry.